Hello and welcome back to the X-Files Revisited. We are on to episode 4, Millennium. Now, this is a kind of cross episode. If anybody watched the Millennium TV show, which was also created by Chris Carter, this kind of gives a finale for that of sorts. Brian? Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah, as far as legacy goes, it is a big one because, if you were a fan of Millennium, then it ends for you here. But for a lot of people, this was maybe their introduction to Millennium, and maybe it didn't go any further than this. You said it's been a long time, about 20 years since you saw Millennium.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see how this episode plays for you, just in terms of coming to it. I mean, it's impossible for both of us really to come to it as if we. I'm just intrigued. I'm intrigued to see how this episode plays to someone who's never seen Millennium.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I'd be curious about
that.
But obviously, we had both already seen it. It was at the time when it came out. It was, for any X-Files mega fans at the time, it was another huge show to get into.
Yeah. And the first season was phenomenal, I thought.
Yeah.
I feel like it kind of went downhill once it got handed over. The creative control was never truly taken away from Chris Carter, but like he kind of handed a lot of the responsibility of it over to Glenn Morgan and James Wong because like he felt like he needed to concentrate his efforts on the X-Files, which was a good move, but not necessarily for Millennium, because I feel like Millennium, it went places.
And Millennium was a naturally darker show as well.
Yes.
It felt, and I'm not saying that the X-Files wasn't adult, but this felt it was much more adult themes to it, and felt very dark at times. So
and because it was specifically like for the most part, it was catching serial killers, so it was like the worst of humanity kind of thing. But okay, so Millennium, 217 episodes. Where, according to IMDb, do you think this is ranked?
I find this one's a hard one to judge because of the Millennium influence. And I do think it's going to be one of those things that people just naturally either love or hate when it comes to the fandom.
Yeah.
I'm going to say high.
Okay.
I think high. I think 32.
Oof. I'm not sure that you've ever been that out of
that
tune I'm not sure you've ever been that out of step with what audiences think. So this is ranked 105.
Wow. So below Hunger?
Yeah. Hungry. Yeah, below Hungry. Yeah, it's below last week's episode. So it is actually, I mean, you can feel free to guess if you like. Out of the 22 season 7 episodes, where do you think this ranks in season 7?
I think 13.
Number 10.
Number 10. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So Hungry was number 9, and this is right behind it at number 10.
I mean, it doesn't bode well for this season, does it? Like, it really doesn't. If like 9 and 10 are ranked 100 and whatever and 105, it's
yes, yeah.
It doesn't bode well.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, again, though, you have to take that with a pinch of salt because we've had so many classic episodes. Just in the first 5 seasons, let alone like 6 as well. So it's at this point it is getting pretty tough to have any of your top 10 episodes from a season get into that top 100 like mix. I don't know. It's tricky. Figures, statistics.
Yeah.
Like lies, damn lies, and statistics and all that. But yeah, I don't know. Let's get into it. Like I say, I'm intrigued to see where you're going to land on this one because I don't know. So we open up at a funeral, and a man, Mr. Johnson, consoles Mrs. Crouch, who is there to send her dead husband off into the afterlife. He worked with her dead husband, who didn't even leave a note, which is a very subtle way of saying the guy killed himself. It was a line that kind of knocked me back a bit. So it didn't even leave a note, and there's like, yeah, blimey.
No, it's good. It's a good line.
Yeah. And then after hours, once the funeral parlour has closed, Johnson, it seems, is still there. He's just tucked away behind a closet, and he starts chanting over and over, "He that believeth in me, though he is dead, yet shall he live." So he's chanting scripture as he opens the coffin, takes off his own clothes, and starts undressing the man in the coffin, which immediately has me going, "Whoa, this is
is this the Triple X Files? What exactly is happening here?"
This is a bit weird. You know, we've had Donny Faster with his kind of death fetish stuff, but this is like, this is a few years down the line when, you know, we've had episodes like Home, and they've pushed the boundaries a bit, and I'm kind of thinking, okay, how much are you pushing it now? So it's not the most comfortable of openings.
No, it's not. And this body is already really decayed, isn't it? It looks like, I mean, I'm not super familiar with bodies, but it just looks it's not fresh.
No, it's not fresh at all. Now I will give that the benefit of the doubt, just because from my personal experience, when my dad died, it just because of the period when it happened, which was the same period, actually. Same period. So in this story, this guy's died over the Christmas period, and my dad died on New Year's Eve. Literally like an hour before New Year's Eve. So roughly around the same period. So maybe it is because of that whole Christmas period, it gets busy. There was a backlog. From my dad dying to getting in the ground was actually just a little over a month. So we didn't even have the funeral until a month after the fact, and that was just because, all those who arrange funerals and whatnot, there was backlogged. So I'll say maybe it's that. Maybe that Christmas period when a lot more people seem to go, apparently. Maybe that's why he's been on hold for a while. And anywho, that's something of a morbid conversation. But we go from there to a rainy graveyard, and we've got our man from Mr. Johnson waiting in his car while it's chucking it down with rain, and he put a phone into the hand of the corpse, and now he's sitting there waiting for a phone call, and sure enough, he gets it. The phone starts ringing, and he doesn't answer it. Nope. It's just like, okay, time to go. So he goes with his spade, dragging it Dawn of the Dead style, because heaven forbid you should just pick it up and carry it. No. It's like, it looks cooler, I guess, on camera to let it hit the floor and then just drag it along. And he's obviously off to dig up a corpse. Yeah,
I mean, I think the intro is pretty solid. It's intriguing. It feels very different, and you know the facts that we've got, what could be, let's face it, zombies. Is an interesting aspect that we've not really touched upon much in the X-Files before. So,
and like it's not necessarily like, not in the traditional sense anyway. It's not necessarily like zombies in the Dawn of the Dead sense. From this point, it feels like maybe this is, are they cheating death? Have they found a way to come back, and they're intending to? This is like some cabal of, let's resurrect ourselves, and I don't know. It's just what are they coming back as? That's the thing. Why would you kill yourself?
Yeah.
To come back. What's the idea there? What's going on behind that? So yeah, plenty of intrigue. So Scully shows up and is accosted by the anxious mortician. It's quite an amusing scene. He's calling. He's like, "Look, I know a dead guy when I see a dead guy, and that guy was definitely dead. I pronounced him correctly, okay?" So, and she's like, what? And then he's like, she takes a look over at the empty grave, and Mulder's there poking around. It's like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
What theories has Mulder been flying around? So she goes over to speak to Mulder, and Mulder is in the empty grave. All the evidence suggests that the body was taken and made to look like it climbed its own way out. At least that's what it looks like if you're a rational human being and actually looks at the evidence, which I liked. I liked that in this case, like Skull. I always love it when, even though we know it's going to go the way that Mulder said he thinks it is, I like it when we actually have the evidence pointing towards a more rational theory that Scully can explain. And in this instance, it's in Scully's favor. Like if you were if you didn't know these guys, if you weren't watching an episode of the X-Files and you came across this case, Mulder gave you his theory, Scully gave you hers. In this situation, Scully's theory lines up completely with all the evidence at this point. So
we should say as well, like for a little bit of a change, when it opens up at the graveyard, it's got the date and the year. So it's just highlighting when it is, and obviously you're heading towards a point when you've got a date and you know that something's coming soon. The Millennium.
Yeah, absolutely. It's for anybody who didn't live through that period, it's kind of hard to truly express the level of anxiety, I think, that was around at that time. Yeah. And there's a lot of people really it never really bothered me, to be honest. No. I didn't really get that caught up in it. But there did seem to be, particularly in the media, or maybe it was just the media trying to make something out of nothing, trying to stir up a story where there wasn't really a story. But there was always this sense of impending, we're coming to the end times because it's the end of the millennium. We've got the millennium bug, which actually turned out to be nothing. The clock's just ticked over.
It's easy now to be naysaying and laugh at it and be like, how ridiculous. But in the build up to that, there was a real worry that a lot of things were going to fail, and not as in cataclysmic things, just as in the banking code wasn't used to cover 4 years. They only covered 2 years, the last 2 digits, and that was going to possibly cause errors, and then that could have ramifications. It was, I think if anything had gone wrong, it was going to be annoyances.
Yeah.
But we did treat it like it was apocalyptic.
And anyone who is born after that particular time is listening to us thinking, what the hell are they talking about?
Old man shouts at the sky.
Yeah. So Johnson is driving, still chanting his biblical passage, and the body is clearly alive in the back of the van.
Yeah.
Then Mulder and Scully fill Skinner in, and I really like this scene because it's.
I love and hate it.
Yeah, I just because Skinner is the one who gives them the case. It's refreshing. I'll say that.
Once the other agents leave, the scene becomes pretty awesome. But up until then, when it's that cringe factor of Mulder sitting there at a boardroom table. They're having theories, and he's just pure like, well, it's necromancy. Someone raised the dead. And then the guy's like, yeah, you think they thought they were raising the dead? And he's like, no, stop. What I said was they actually raised the dead.
Yep.
And you're just going, oh, shut up.
You do, but I do that on Scully's behalf and somewhat on Skinner's behalf. Yeah. Because those two are sat there trying to have a rational conversation and Mulder's throwing his stuff out there. But on the other hand, I have such an appreciation for anyone who sticks to what they believe, no matter the circumstances. Like, I feel like it's something that is seriously lacking in today's world, where people don't say certain things that they're thinking out of fear of being judged in a particular way. And it's so they follow the crowd, or they toe the party line until they know they're in a room full of people that they can say that stuff with. So I actually, I love that. That's Mulder. He believes that stuff and he'll say it as if it's fact, because to him it is fact, and it's everyone else who needs to catch up to speed. So yeah.
I mean, it might be fact to him, but it's also necromancy. Like, he's not like arguing like at some kind of scientific point of that. He's just like, magic's real, dead people are alive.
Uh-huh.
That just is.
Yep. But I do love that the moment Skinner is able to get the other agents out of the room, he's like, all right, guys, listen, I've got someone that I think you should really look into. It's like, whoa, Skinner. It's like,
I like that Mulder's annoyed. He's like, when were you going to tell us?
He's like, why didn't you tell us with those other guys in the room? It's almost like you feel like this stuff isn't worth bringing to light unless it's just us. So Mulder's theory is necromancy. Part of the ritual is to wear the dead man's clothes to create a bond with him. Oh, so that explains the creepy stuff at the beginning where you're going, what are you doing?
I'm sure Ed Gein did the same thing.
Yeah. So Skinner clears the room, except for Mulder and Scully, and he puts them onto the Millennium group. So I like that it's Skinner who does this, because let's not forget the Millennium group was an FBI kind of sanctioned. They basically, they were an independent group, but they were brought in by the FBI. They were used by the FBI as a consulting group. So very close ties to the FBI. And given that those ties are ties that the FBI would want to bury, it stands to reason that something like this would have to be given to Mulder by someone in the FBI, someone who's who's in his court, so to speak. So Skinner, makes perfect sense that he would be the one who puts him onto it. So we go to a psychiatric hospital where they've tracked down one Frank Black, who Mulder knows a little bit about. He's done a bit of reading on. He's aware that Frank Black was a criminal profiler, something that Mulder is very much in tune with, given that he himself is a criminal profiler. But Frank Black is like, he is in criminal profiling like Spielberg is in film directing. And if we used to think that Mulder was the Spielberg of criminal profiling, when you put him in a room with Frank... Pardon?
Mulder's now the J.J. Abrams, is that?
Yeah, yes, that's a perfect analogy. That is a perfect analogy. I think anyone who's not seen Millennium and they've just watched X-Files and they love X-Files, as quite rightly they should, you're going to think of Mulder as your Spielberg of criminal profiling. And it's only when you put him in a room with Frank Black that you realise, no, he was kind of the pretender to the throne. Frank Black is real, is the the next step up from Mulder. But so it's I always was always intrigued to see what would happen if these two guys met. Would they get on, or would one sniff out the other's BS and kind of would they? Yeah, it was a bit like when Doggett is brought into the series a little bit later on in season. Yeah, obviously, but when Doggett gets brought in, there's always this kind of tension of what's going to happen actually once Mulder and Doggett really meet. So you've got that to come. But here, yeah, we've got Frank Black. So, and as a fan of both shows, I was always curious, how would those two get on with each other if they were in a room together? So now we get to find out. So they basically, Mulder very kindly asks Frank Black to take a look at these photos and get involved in this case. And Frank Black says, no, thank you. He's not having anything to do with it. He's done. His criminal profiling days are over. He's out. Yeah. And then he's watching a sports game on TV and he says, it's 1st and 18th. And Mulder's like, actually, it's 1st and 10th. And then off they go, not realizing that actually he's just given him a little nugget of information there. But
yeah.
So
I like seeing Frank. I like seeing him back in it, and there's an instant wait because it's Lance Henriksen. You know, it's not just like some bit part player who it's a good actor who we've seen in many things before. He carries that intensity with him. Even when he's talking to Mulder, he is like you can tell he's trying to stay out of it, but he is a little bit interested. But he's trying his best, and I think his performance, although it's kind of stoic and not wanting to interact with these kind of people and just focus on the game, you can still read between the lines here.
Yeah.
So, I think it's great seeing him back.
Yeah. And on a personal note, I have met Lance Henriksen. He very graciously filmed an intro for my channel, my separate channel. Spent some time with the guy. I think he's awesome. Such a nice guy in real life. Was more than happy to just sit down with me and chat for ages. And that could have had something to do with the fact that I jumped out of the queue once I realised the queue that I was in was not for him, but was for Robert Englund. And so I went to this convention. Yeah. I went specifically to see Lance Henriksen. Got in the queue for what I thought was his line. And when I realised it wasn't, and there actually wasn't a queue yet for Lance Henriksen, which just boggles my brain that... I'm sorry, but I know horror fans are a very distinct group and, they're very fanatical. But there was a really big line for Robert Englund and there was no one yet at Lance Henriksen. And once I realised that, I literally stepped out of the queue and said quite loudly, not meaning to, something along the lines of, "Oh no, I'm here for Henriksen. I don't give a toss about Englund," and stepped over. And I don't know if that ingratiated me into his good books or not, but he sat me down for a good 10-15 minutes and just had a chat with me about his career and that. So yeah, that's my personal Lance Henriksen story. Love the guy. Think he's a great actor, and a heck of a lot better of an actor than Robert Englund. Sorry, Freddie fanboys, but that's just the way it is. Anyway, moving on. Johnson is fixing a flat tire. So, convenience of all conveniences. If he hadn't have got a flat, you'd never find him out.
Yeah.
It's one of those plot devices that they have to put in there because they need something. They need something that can get them onto the case.
But it doesn't feel as much of a contrivance as some other things that have done the X-Files.
No.
Within the kind of story, I suppose. So.
Yeah. And stuff happens like that. Yeah. There's famous incidences of like I can't, was it the Yorkshire Ripper? I think he was caught just because of he got pulled over for something like a tail light or something stupid like that, and it's like boom, got you. So yeah, it does happen. So he's fixing a flat tire and a cop comes over to help. I always feel sorry for the cop who isn't the douchebag cop, but he's actually someone trying to do their job, trying to serve and protect and be a good, And he regrets it because he hears something banging about in the van, and he's like,
Yep.
"Open the van!"
Or
And
the flies buzzing and stuff like that.
yeah, it's like a dead giveaway that
And the
something
smell.
rotten.
You mentioned something about the rotten
Yeah,
smell. Yeah.
yeah. So and then he gets taken out by a zombie, basically. Just as Johnson starts putting a ring of salt.
Yeah.
Never trust a man who starts whipping salt out and putting a ring around himself.
Yeah. But again, like I feel a lot of the time when the X-Files go to like supernatural elements, it can be hokey at times or tongue in cheek, but like this one it has that Millennium feel of being serious, dark. You know, you never feel as if the tongue's in the cheek or it's hokey. It feels like a kind of, he has his beliefs and they're beliefs for a reason and it works for him. It feels real.
Yeah. You know what side of the fence this episode is sitting on, unlike the previous one.
Yeah.
So Mulder and Scully are at the scene because the body's been found. Well, the cop's been missing, and obviously they found his car at the side of the road and stuff. So they find the body, and there is a piece of paper. First of all, the mouth is kind of stapled shut, and then there's a piece of paper just in the lips, and so Mulder takes that out, and it's Revelation 1:18 in the mouth, which I can't remember the specific quote, but it's all about resurrection of the dead or something like that.
Fire and brimstone.
So we go back to Frank, and basically it's because obviously he said he said about the sports thing. It's 1st and 18th, which is obviously the Bible passage, Revelation 1:18. So that sends them back to Frank, and Mulder's like, "Why the clue? Why not just come out and say it?" Which would be an obvious question to ask. It feels like he's playing with them, but for Frank, it's the best he feels he can offer because he doesn't want to come right out and get involved in the case because he feels people are watching, people who could take his kid away. For him, everything in his life right now is geared towards getting custody of his daughter. His wife has died, and for anyone who saw the show, you would know that because that was a very big part of Millennium, was when his wife got taken out. Now his wife's parents are trying to take custody of the child, and so so he needs to be distanced from the work enough so that everyone involved will see that he can focus on his kid and not the work. The problem is that he can't. That's always been Frank's problem. He has a compulsion in the same way that a serial killer needs to kill. He has the compulsion to stop them, to get inside their heads and prevent them from taking more life. So Frank looks at the files, and basically these guys, because there was 4 of them, the one that was at the beginning that we opened up on, who was in the coffin, who's been resurrected, he was the 4th of 4, obviously. So Frank looks at the files, and he says that these men, based on what he knows about his past experience of the Millennium Group and where he feels they were heading, the 4 men see themselves as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. They willingly sacrificing themselves to bring about the end times. He profiles Johnson, the man who's kind of bringing them all back to life, and he says that he's a loner, he's religious, he's quite insignificant, and he will return to the sheriff's body, most likely, to stop him from rising too soon. Frank gets a call from his daughter. So presumably these 4 horsemen will be unleashed upon the world on the Millennium, and basically anyone they attack will turn into zombies. It's Dawn of the Dead, basically, but orchestrated.
Love this sequence. I think this sequence is fantastic because I love the idea of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. I think that's a really neat way to tackle that, because they're always, whenever they're in movies, they're always like gods of death, pretty much, like riding
Yeah.
crazy steeds, and this is a great idea for it. Again, we're bringing zombies into a TV show, and it doesn't feel fantastical. It
Yeah.
feels it doesn't feel out of the realms of possibility, and I love the idea that there's all these things about why is people going to why did the zombie outbreak happen? Blah 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 blah. Blah.
Yeah.
This feels like a really kind of rooted and solid beginning of
Yeah.
a zombie outbreak,
Yeah.
and the whole profiling sequence cut with footage of the guy, like his homestead, it would do that, showing as well as telling, was a really interesting visual way of getting this across. I thought this was an outstanding sequence full of great information, furthering the plot, giving the basis of what's going to happen, and introducing aspects of the colour. It was absolutely terrific.
Yeah. And it gives you a fully rounded picture of just what it is that Frank does and why he is the best at what he does.
Yeah.
Because everything he's saying is borne out in the images. It's like, so this guy clearly knows what he's talking about. He knows how to profile.
Now, it's great you're saying that, like he's a great profiler and all that, but as it turns out at the end,
he knows this guy's kind of in on it. Yeah. Yeah, but it's just like, but again, that's like for anyone who has seen Millennium, this profiling sequence is also equally true. Like, if you know the character of Frank Black, you know that irrespective of whether he knows this guy, this is the kind of thing he would normally do in the show. So it's kind of a bit of a rug pull at the end to see that he knows him, he's aware of this plan, he could very well be in on it. So yeah, it was kind of a nice switcheroo, so to speak. But yeah, so Frank then gets a call from his daughter. Yeah, Mulder says they need to find the Four Horsemen. Scully says wait for Johnson to show up at the morgue. They've mangled the biblical prophecy. I like that Scully is now talking specifically about biblical matters, about interpretation. We saw her come back to her faith back in season 5, and I like that. Through the show, we see that's now a touchstone for her. So she's the one who's saying, "No, they've mangled biblical prophecy. There's no reason to believe that anything they're saying is actually going to happen." But Mulder's all like, "Look, if they take the staples out of that guy's mouth, he's going to come back alive. He's a zombie." So
I do like this little walk and talk, because just after they've spoken to Frank, and they're basically just like, "Oh, I think he's right in the money." Yeah, he's just like, he's pretty great, isn't he?
I also liked just a little bit of logic that Scully brought up, which was that 2001 is actually the start of the new millennium. Which it kind of calls all of the Millennium groups theatrics and attempts to manipulate the world order into question. It calls them out for what they are, which is bullshit. It's like, it's just like, you got it wrong, guys. All of this planning that you did, all of these machinations, all of these like crazy plans and government like interceptions and subterfuge, you got the date wrong.
Yep.
If you'd had planned it for a year later, it might have worked, because that's actually the new millennium. But yeah, that's pretty funny. So Mulder is like, don't let them remove the staples from the deputy's mouth. But it's too late, because as he's saying that, cut to Doctor pulling the staples from the guy's mouth. Scully shows up at the morgue, and she finds the morgue lady, who is clearly in a bad way. She's been bitten. She's been injured. And then she sees Johnson. Then the deputy, who is now risen from the dead and is walking towards her. She fires several shots, but alas, that is it. Scully has been taken out because we see her gun slide across the floor. So yeah, clearly she's a goner, and that's it. No more Scully. End off. So Skinner arrives to find the bodies, and Scully, he pulls back the cover.
Yeah, look, she's over there. Like one of the guys literally says she's over there and points to the corpse.
Yeah.
What a guy.
Yeah. So he pulls back the cover, and it's not Scully. It's the mortician woman. Scully pops up for, just to break that tension that we were all feeling from the prospect that she might have actually copped it then. No one was feeling that. So she's still alive, and the necromancer shot the deputy in the head. So that gives us our our zombie trope of you got a headshot, you got to get the headshot. Mulder was right, it seems, but where is he? And Scully and Skinner both on the page here, both on the same page as Mulder. It's like this is something Scully has seen with her own eyes.
It's irrefutable for her. Normally she just misses it, or she's passed out. I'll pass out in the ice while this giant spaceship takes off, or I'll just happen to miss this moment, or she always just misses things, but this is irrefutable. She shot this corpse and it didn't drop. And I love that she doesn't try and come up with any stupid explanation to wangle her way out of having to believe it. And there's a great turn of phrase that came. He was dead, then he wasn't.
Yeah.
Love that. Absolutely love that.
Yeah. Great stuff. So Mulder finds the house and he takes some salt from the bin. Just through the bin.
Previous to that, there's a little moment when he's in the car. He's crossed off the list, so we know. Like it's the small things that really elevate for me. So the fact that he's been crossing off the list, he's been checking names. Yeah. He tries to use his phone and there's no signal. So again, it's explaining why he's not been in contact, which I really kind of like.
Yeah, so Mulder finds the house and he goes through the bins, thankfully finds some salt. He's going to need that.
Because it's a huge wrapping. It must have been a massive bag of salt, yeah?
Yeah, well, that guy clearly goes through a lot of salt. It's like, you saw how many times he's had to just whip it out when police show up. Just starts putting a circle around himself. So he takes some salt out of the bin and then he enters the house. He goes to the basement and finds zombies and gets locked in. That's when what's his tits? Johnson kind of just locks him in, and it's like boom, he's down there.
It's quite a spooky sequence down in the basement. The zombies rising from under the dirt almost. It's just it's a kind of scary section. I like it.
It's almost like they need to live down there in the way that a vampire needs to go in a coffin.
Yeah,
like a zombie. It's like maybe a new piece of law in which a zombie has to return to the dirt in order to sleep.
I wonder if they're like laying in wait, hiding, like waiting for the prey to come by, just to like jump out and attack.
Yeah, I think they're waiting for their time, which is like the Millennium, innit?
Yeah. But
they just don't realise that it's actually a year from now. They're going to be in there for another year. But I just, something occurred to me as well is that so obviously this episode definitively states that Millennium and the X-Files exist they're in the same universe basically. Mm-hmm. So while Millennium was happening, so was the X-Files, which it's only a small detail, and you kind of wash it away by just saying, it's just different. You just imagine it was somebody else playing the part. But I love how Terry O'Quinn has played 3 major roles throughout He's on 2 in the X-Files. He had a guest spot back in season 2 in the Aubrey episode, and then he played Darius Michaud in the movie.
Yeah.
But then he was kind of like one of the main bad guys in Millennium. So it's like this dude gets around, man. It's like there's got to be some kind of X-Files fan theory out there somewhere that ties these 3 men together. But yeah, so Scully goes and asks Frank. She's trying to find Mulder. He's not picking up. Frank is unhelpful. Then he asks Octavia. And did you notice who Octavia was?
Yes.
It's Octavia Spencer.
It is.
It's like, I find it pretty funny that Octavia Spencer just randomly randomly there in an episode of the X-Files, and even her character is referred to as Octavia. I feel like that was the... I feel like she didn't even have a name. I feel like the character didn't have a name, but maybe Lance Henriksen, because he just obviously on the set got to know her as Octavia, just said her name.
Yeah, but it could be as well. I like to think of it as like, because Frank's a profiler, he gets to know everybody, so it's not just like nurse. It's like he knows everybody's first name, even if it's the actor, and throws it in there. But what I like about the conversation between Scully and Frank is that she's asking for help. He's not really there. And then she says that she's seen it with her own eyes, the kind of zombie coming to life. And that I think that kind of shakes him, because that's what makes him leave. Because he's like, up until then, he's like, this isn't going to happen. Like, like it's just all nonsense, blah, blah, blah. But then it's a sudden, like, this is possibly going to happen.
Yeah.
I think that's what pushes him into action. The fact that she mentions that she's seen the zombie.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Just another bit of fan fiction, if you want to shoot that way. You could argue this is the same psychiatric home that, or hospital, if you will, that Octavia Spencer ends up being in Halloween 2, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, because she plays a nurse, doesn't she, in Halloween 2, gets killed. Yeah, I think I'd rather avoid that as well, to be honest. But I don't want any links between Rob Zombie and the X-Files. Thank you very much. So, Frank's unhelpful. Then he asks Octavia Spencer to sign him out. He's like, that's it. He's ready to go. We know that he's not quite switched off to this case as we thought he was. Mm-hmm. So Mulder remains in the basement. We don't see it, but he has killed one of them.
Yes.
So, that would have been nice to see, I think.
Yep.
And it may even be one of the deleted scenes, because I think there are some deleted scenes on this episode, and that might be one of them. It could only have been a time constraints thing, I would imagine. But, I mean, it might not even be one of the deleted scenes. And if it isn't, all I'll say is it's a scene we needed, I think.
Yes.
But not needed, but it would have been nice just to have something that is like a clear... Because we know there's 4 horsemen. We know that all 4 have now been collected. We know that all 4 are down there in the basement. And to just get told that Mulder's killed one of them, it's like, oh, has he? Okay, that's 1 down, and we didn't even get to see it happen. It's just a bit okay.
Yeah. And because Mulder's taking him out, you're not sure if it's an accident or not,
or if it's even managed to do it. It's just like kind of missed the shot, just slightly left, and So Frank rocks up at the house and starts talking to Johnson like they're besties.
Yeah.
And they go inside, and that's like, oh, okay. Frank's a part of this. He's part of this operation. Like, did he get turned by the Millennium Group? Did he take over the Millennium Group? Did he buy into their philosophies in some way? And that's the real reason he's in psychiatric hospital. Who knows? But the answers to those questions are very quickly given. Johnson is expecting Frank to become one of the horsemen, to replace one that Mulder has shot. So it's in that little nugget that we get the detail that one of them has gone. So he gives Frank a gun, but Frank turns it on Johnson.
Yep.
Yeah. So did you think for a moment that Frank was a part of this? No. Yeah, there you go.
I think he was a part of it, as in he was staying
Aware of it.
knowledgeable. Yeah, but he
Yeah.
wasn't like brainwashed into believing that this was.
Yeah. He hadn't drunk the Kool-Aid, so to
Yeah.
speak. Yeah. So yeah, Scully gets a call from Skinner, says Frank received calls from Johnson. So they obviously can trace. They know that Johnson's called him, so they trace Johnson's address, and off Scully goes. Johnson pleads with Frank to let the end happen.
Yeah.
What comes after has to be better than what is happening now, right? So, which is, not to get too dark or anything, it is a question I often ask myself when I look at this world. And as a believer, as someone who does believe that at some point the end will come and God will judge us all, I sometimes find myself desiring it sooner rather than later, to be honest, when I look at some of what the world is capable of. It's just when to hear Johnson ask that question, I'm kind of like, kind of got a point.
You're sipping the Kool-Aid a little bit.
little bit, but then it's obviously the answer against that comes in everything that Millennium was about, which is that relationship between Frank and his daughter. It's the antithesis as to why you wouldn't want that to happen. I'll go a little bit more into that actually at the end of the episode, but Johnson pleads with Frank to let it happen, blah blah blah. Frank enters the basement. He takes one of these zombies out, and then he's attacked by another as Scully breaks in through the gate. Mulder shoots the attacker in the head. He can't miss because it's point blank, so he picks up the gun. He's like, boom, there you go. Even Mulder can get that one. But it's all because Frank's kind of wrestling with him and stuff, so Mulder's able to get a shot to the head. Otherwise, he probably would have been screwed. And finally, for the last zombie, Mulder is all out of bullets, and the zombies come in right for him, and then takes a shot to the head, and it is Scully who has managed to get into the house and get down to the basement and save them. So yeah, so they all get to take it's nice because it's like they all get to take out at least one zombie, and that's kind of, in some ways, that's why it's like let's not show the one that Mulder took out, and then that way our three heroes of these two shows all get like an equal. We're going to take one out each. It's kind of like, all right, okay, that's nice. Scully brings Frank's daughter to him. He takes her and leaves rather than watching the millennial celebrations. As Mulder and Scully watch the New Year celebrations, Mulder kisses Scully. And I see you're pulling that face because you're just like, I hate anything romantic between Mulder and Scully. But the reason this scene is so awesome, one, it's really playful. I like the playful kind of look that Mulder gives and then that Scully gives back. And as he's leaning in, there's a look on Scully's face that's like, is this happening? Is this actually about? And then it happens. And then Mulder pulls back. And there's kind of like this sense of delight on Mulder's face. Like, see, the world didn't end. And then you see Scully's face. And she's kind of like... It's like... It's just a really great look from Scully that's almost like, I kind of wish it did.
Unnecessary.
No, oh, come on. You cold-hearted... Even you have got to like this scene. This is I like this scene. Love this scene. It's a great Mulder and Scully moment. It's not over-egged. It comes in an appropriate moment. They've literally just saved the world from the end times. I think, it's a perfect place to put it. It's great.
Yep.
I love it.
We should have cut the episode 20 seconds shorter and just cut that straight off. I'll jump into the wrap up again, Brian. It's
Go on.
it's a great episode for me. I loved it. I loved seeing Frank back. I think he's a great character and adds so much. I can't believe they brought proper zombies into the X-Files and it doesn't feel ridiculous. It's not tongue in cheek. There's not quips all the time. It is seriously taken, and there is action that has to be taken to stop this. It is a real world threat. It's not just a small town. This could be a global disaster if these things get out and cause havoc. I think it's altogether. I won't go into every little bit about it. I think this is a great episode. For me, it's a 5 out of 5. I loved it.
Wow. Okay, 5. All right.
I don't think. I think other than that kiss at the end, there's nothing I would change about the episode. Just delightful. Yeah, great.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a 4. I think it's a 4. I would like to have seen that first zombie getting taken out, rather than just have it told to us in dialogue. There isn't really much to fault it, but I just, because it wraps up the whole Millennium stuff in one episode, and it does kind of feel more like an X-Files episode than it does Millennium, which obviously it should, because it is an X-Files episode. Yeah, I don't know. I just I feel like it should have been something bigger, grander.
Do you know what it
rather than
been,
just rather than just 4 dead dudes in a basement, you know?
It should have been the last episode of season 6 and the first 3 episodes of season 7. It should have been.
Yes. Yes, it should. They should have had, like, you know, really cross them over. Really, like, bring the 2 mythologies together and have this 3-story arc about these 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and get Frank back out and get them really working together. So, but no, as a standalone episode that wraps all that stuff up, you know, it's really solid. It does a pretty damn good job, and there's some really great character moments in there. I do like the overall kind of the ideas that this particular episode explores through these 2 characters of Frank Black and Johnson. You know, like, again, you've got Johnson, who has come to that point because of his religiosity where he's like, you know what, I would rather it end now. I would rather, you know, like, if we can get to heaven sooner, why aren't we doing it? Let's orchestrate it. Let's make that happen. And then you've got Frank, who's like, actually, you know what, we can bring heaven on earth through our relationships with other people, by the way we make things better, by the way we love our daughter, in his case, and our kids and whatnot. So there is that sense there that, you know, it is a more godly pursuit to raise your families and carry on this game of life than to just quash it away for the sake of, you know, trying to get your place in heaven faster. So yeah, it's got some nice ideas running through it, but yeah, I'm very entertaining. I liked it. Good stuff.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about Rush episode 5.
Right. My memories of this one are, so you remember last week I said with Hungry that it was very much from the perspective of the monster of the week. But even though Mulder and Scully weren't greatly in it, when they were in it, they did at least feel like they were active participants in what was going on.
Yep.
My memory of Rush is that it's kind of the opposite of that the story does revolve around these certain characters that are the monster or monsters of the week, if you want to call them that. And Mulder and Scully kind of, they're in it and they are investigating, but I feel like if you took them out, that's my memory anyway. I could be wrong. I could be projecting onto that, but it just feels like I got to the end of it and was kind of unsatisfied with Mulder and Scully's involvement ultimately, and the episode in general.
Right.
But I might be pleasantly surprised. It could be better than I think. So
Yeah, after a kind of rocky start, I feel like we've had some, two fairly decent, entertaining episodes. So, I'd be happy if it just continues that sort of vein. I don't think
yeah,
it will, but I'd be interested in that. So, yeah, as always, we'd like to thank you for listening or watching along, whether it be podcasts or on YouTube. We appreciate it. And as always, we'll ask for a review. We really appreciate those. It helps people find our channel, find our podcast, and sharing our passion for the X Files. And we will see you next week for Rush.